The alarm system screamed through every corridor of Coalition Station Varan. Commander, Prilkson's forearms moved frantically across the control panels, his blue skin glistening with stress fluids. Outside the reinforced windows, another explosion lit up the darkness of space. The Krethian swarm was closing in. How long until they breach Sector 7? Prilkson asked, his voice crackling through the translator device. 20 minutes, maybe less, replied his second officer, a tall insectoid creature whose antennae drooped with exhaustion. They had been fighting for 3 weeks straight. The Coalition forces were broken, supplies nearly gone, and hope fading with each passing hour. Prilkson made a decision. His webbed fingers activated the emergency broadcast system, sending a distress call across the entire galaxy. Every Coalition member world would receive it. He knew most couldn't help. They were too far away or already fighting their own battles against the swarm. But he had to try. The message was simple. Coalition Station Varan requesting immediate military assistance. Krethian forces overwhelming defensive positions. Civilian evacuation incomplete. Any available forces please respond. Hours passed. A few responses came in, mostly sympathies and regrets. The nearest fleet was 4 days away. They would arrive to find only wreckage and bodies. Then a new message appeared on Prilkson's screen. The origin point made him pause. Earth. That strange little world that had joined the Coalition only 2 years ago. They barely had faster-than-light travel. What could they possibly offer? He opened the message anyway. Earth Defense Force receiving your distress call. We are dispatching a response team immediately. Estimated arrival, 6 hours. Hold your position. Help is coming? 6 hours? That was impossible. Earth was 3 sectors away. Even with the best Coalition jump drives, the journey took at least 2 days. Prilkson checked the message authenticity. It was genuine. He had no choice but to believe them and hope. 5.5 hours later, reality tore open near the station. A ship emerged from a jump point, moving fast. It was smaller than expected, angular and dark, covered in strange markings. The design was aggressive, built for function rather than the flowing aesthetics most Coalition species preferred. Human vessel, this is Coalition Station Varan. Please transmit your docking clearance, the communications officer announced. This is EDF Hammer. Commander Tiemann speaking. Sending clearance now. Request immediate berth and briefing on current tactical situation. The voice was calm, almost casual. Prilkson felt a strange chill. The station was under siege, death minutes away, and this human sounded like he was discussing weather. The human ship docked smoothly. Prilkson rushed to the landing bay with Ambassador Valthara, an elegant avian diplomat who had experience with newcomer species. They needed to assess what help Earth had actually sent. The airlock hissed open. 5 figures stepped through. Prilkson's first thought was that they looked wrong. Not alien in the usual sense, most species had strange features. But these humans moved in a way that set off instincts he didn't know he had. They walked with controlled power, muscles moving under their uniforms like coiled springs. Their eyes scanned the bay constantly, tracking every movement, every shadow. The lead human stepped forward. He was tall for his species, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at things. Commander Tiemann, Earth Defense Force, he said, extending a hand in the human greeting gesture. Prilkson touched it carefully with one of his own hands. The human's grip was firm, controlled, but Prilkson could feel immense strength held back. Commander Prilkson, thank you for responding so quickly. I must admit, I didn't think anyone could arrive this soon. We developed new jump technology, Tiemann said simply. We brought 4 more specialists. This is Dr. Hai Jin, our medical officer and xenobiologist. Jinho, combat engineer. Myray, our pilot, and Danby, communications specialist. Each human acknowledged their introduction with a nod. Proxen studied them carefully. Dr. Haijin was shorter, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jinho looked relaxed, almost bored, though his hands rested near equipment on his belt. Myray stood with perfect balance, her posture suggesting she could move instantly in any direction. Bambi was the youngest looking, but her eyes had the same predatory awareness as the others. "We need to get you to the command center," Velthara said, her feathers ruffled with anxiety. "The situation is critical. We have perhaps an hour before the Krethians breach our final defensive line." "Understood," Teeman said. "Lead the way." As they moved through the corridors, Proxen explained the situation. The Krethians had attacked 3 weeks ago in overwhelming numbers. They had destroyed the Coalition's fleet and now swarmed around the station, like predators circling wounded prey. The station still held 10,000 civilians who couldn't be evacuated in time. "What about the planet below?" Teeman asked. "Varan Prime? It's a mineral world. High gravity, extreme temperatures, toxic atmosphere. The Krethians have established forward bases there for their assault." "Why do you ask?" "Just gathering information," Teeman replied. In the command center, Timon studied the tactical displays. His team spread out, each examining different aspects of the situation. Dr. Hejin looked at casualty reports. Jinho analyzed the station's defensive systems. Myray studied ship movements. Danby began interfacing with the communications network. "You have wounded?" Dr. Haijin asked. "Yes, several hundred in the medical bay," Proxen answered. "But we need military assistance more than medical right now." "I'll help with the wounded," Haijin said simply. She left before anyone could respond. Tamin continued studying the displays. His expression never changed, but Proxen noticed his eyes moving rapidly, taking in vast amounts of information. Finally, he spoke. "Commander, what are the exact environmental conditions on Varan Prime?" Proxen blinked his large eyes in confusion. "I already told you. High gravity, about 1.8 times standard. Surface temperature ranges from -70 to +60 degrees. The atmosphere is mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide with sulfur compounds. Lethal to most species without heavy environmental suits. Water presence? Some ice at the poles. Occasional acid rain. Why does this matter?" Tamin looked at him directly. "Because that's where we'll fight them." Ambassador Velthara's feathers stood on end. "That's suicide. No coalition force has ever successfully operated on that planet's surface for more than a few hours. The conditions are too extreme." "For coalition species, perhaps," Tamin said calmly. "Commander Proxen, here's what we're gonna do. Your forces will hold the station. My team will deploy to Varan Prime and eliminate the Krethian forward bases. Once their staging ground is destroyed, the siege becomes unsustainable. They'll have to withdraw. You're serious?" Proxen couldn't believe what he was hearing. 5 of you on a planet that kills coalition soldiers in hours against thousands of Krethians? "Yes," Teeman said. "We're from Earth. Extreme environments are what we do." Before Proxen could respond, alarms blared again. The Krethians were launching another assault wave. "We need to move," Ting said. "Get us full tactical data on the Krethian positions and planetary topography. We deploy in 2 hours." As the humans left to prepare, Proxen looked at Ambassador Velthara. The avian diplomat's expression mirrored his own fear. "What have we brought to our station?" she whispered. Dr. Haijin walked into the medical bay and stopped. The scene before her would haunt most people. Wounded soldiers from a dozen different species lay on beds, their bodies broken in ways unique to their biology. Some had lost limbs, others suffered from toxin exposure. The medical staff moved between them with exhausted desperation. The head physician, a crystalline being named Krelix, approached her. "Are you the human doctor? I appreciate the offer to help, but unless you have training in xenobiology, there's little you can do. Each species requires completely different treatment protocols." Haijin looked at him calmly. "I have doctorates in both human medicine and xenobiology. I've studied every known coalition species. Show me your worst cases." Krelix led her to a patient, one of the aquatic species like Commander Proxen. "This one has severe respiratory damage. Our equipment can't properly calibrate for his fluid requirements. He has maybe 6 hours." Haijin examined the patient quickly, her hands moving with practiced precision. She checked monitors, adjusted fluid levels, and recalibrated the breathing apparatus. "He needs a mixture of oxygenated saline with trace minerals. His gills are healing but need support. Adjust the temperature down by 2 degrees. He'll stabilize in 20 minutes. Krelix stared. "How could you possibly know that so quickly?" "I learned," Haijin said simply. She moved to the next patient. For the next 18 hours, she worked without stopping. Every wounded soldier received her attention. She diagnosed conditions that had puzzled the station's doctors for days. She performed 3 emergency surgeries using techniques adapted from human medicine but modified for alien biology. Krelix watched in growing amazement and concern. The human never sat down, never rested. She drank water occasionally, but refused food. Her hands remained steady through every procedure. When he finally insisted she take a break, Haijin looked at him with confusion. "Why?" "There are still patients who need care. You've been working for 18 hours. No coalition species can function at peak performance for that long without rest." "I'm not tired yet," Haijin replied. "On Earth, medical residents often work 24-hour shifts. Our bodies adapted to need less sleep than most species. I can continue for at least another 6 hours before my performance degrades." Krelix felt that same chill Commander Proxen had experienced. These humans were not built like other beings. Meanwhile, Jinho and another specialist named Sejun inspected the station's defensive perimeters. The Coalition's head of security, a heavily armored being named Throck, guided them through the damaged sections. "This area took a direct hit yesterday," Throck explained as they entered a corridor where the gravity generators had failed. "We can't send repair crews in because the gravity is nearly double standard. Too dangerous." Jinho simply walked into the corridor. Sejun followed. Both moved normally, as if the crushing gravity was nothing unusual. Throck stood frozen at the entrance. "How are you doing that?" "Earth's gravity is already higher than your standard," Jinho called back. He examined the damaged wall panels with interest. "This is maybe 1.9 times Earth normal. Uncomfortable, but manageable." "Uncomfortable?" Throck couldn't process this. His own species would be crushed in minutes under such pressure. Sejun hefted a piece of debris that Throck estimated weighed at least 100 kilograms in the current gravity. The human tossed it aside casually. "Your defensive positions are poorly designed," Sejun observed. "These barriers won't stop a determined assault." "They've held for 3 weeks," Throck said defensively. "They've held because the Krethians are probing for weaknesses, not committing to a full breach. When they decide to push seriously, these defenses will collapse in minutes." Jinho pointed to several structural weak points. "We can reinforce these areas, but honestly, your best bet is what Commander Teeman proposed. Take the fight to them." Back in the command center, Tanin studied the detailed scans of Varan Prime that Danby had pulled from the station's databases. Commander Proxen watched nervously. "The Krethians have established 3 major staging bases on the surface," Timon said. "Here, here, and here. They're using underground tunnel networks that connect to processing facilities for the minerals they're extracting. Yes, they're stripping the planet while using it as a staging ground for the assault. We've tried bombing runs, but the atmosphere and gravity make accurate strikes nearly impossible. We lost 8 fighters on the last attempt. Tammin looked at Myray, who stood nearby. Could you fly in those conditions? Myray studied the data. Winds up to 200 kilometers per hour, electrical storms, reduced visibility, and strong gravitational pull. It would be challenging. Can you do it? Yes, no hesitation. No doubt, just simple certainty. Ambassador Velthara, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Commander Tammin, I don't understand. Even if you can survive on Varan Prime's surface, you're talking about 5 soldiers against thousands of Krethian warriors. The numbers alone make this impossible. Tammin turned to face her. Ambassador, may I ask you a question? What do you know about Earth? Very little, she admitted. Your planet was surveyed briefly before Coalition membership was approved. It was noted as having slightly higher than standard gravity and an active ecosystem. Earth is what we call a death world, Ting said quietly. Nearly everything on our planet evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most species. We have predators that hunt in packs with coordination that rivals military tactics. We have plants that produce toxins for defense. Our weather includes hurricanes that can level cities and earthquakes that reshape continents. He pulled up an image of Earth on the display. This is our home. We didn't become strong despite these conditions. We became strong because of them. High gravity made us develop dense muscle and bone structure. Predators made us develop advanced spatial awareness and threat assessment. Climate extremes made us adaptable. And competing with other humans made us strategic. Prilkson felt his stress fluids increase. You're saying your entire species evolved to fight? We evolved to survive, Teaming corrected. Fighting is just one tool for survival. But yes, Earth made us very good at it. The conditions on Varan Prime that seem lethal to you are merely difficult for us. And the Krethians, while dangerous, are predictable. They're insects, following pheromone commands and instinct. We're persistence predators with strategic thinking. That's why 5 of us can change this battle. Before anyone could respond, Danby called out from her station. Commander, I've intercepted Krethian communications. They've detected our arrival. The transmissions are showing increased activity. What are they saying? Teeman asked. Danby's translation software processed the alien signals. It's mostly tactical coordination, but there's one repeated phrase that's interesting. The translation is rough, but it seems to mean unknown threat identified or possibly new predator detected. Ambassador Velthara's feathers ruffled. They sense something dangerous about you. Good, Teeman said. Fear is a useful tool. Danby, can you monitor their command frequencies? Already on it. Their encryption is simple. I should have full access within an hour. Prilkson couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Krethian communication networks had resisted Coalition codebreakers for years. This human had cracked them in minutes. How? He asked. Danby shrugged. Pattern recognition and probability analysis. Humans are good at finding patterns. We had to be to survive. Predicting where prey would go, reading weather signs, understanding social dynamics, it all required advanced pattern processing. Your computers are faster, but our brains are built for this kind of problem. Myray returned from checking their ship. The hammer is ready for deployment. Environmental suits are loaded and calibrated for Varan Prime conditions. We can launch whenever you give the order, Commander. Tammin nodded. Final equipment check in 1 hour. We deploy at dawn, local time for the primary Krethian base. It'll give us maximum visibility while they're transitioning between nocturnal and diurnal activity patterns. You're actually going through with this, Prilkson said softly. Yes, This is what we came here to do. Timon's expression softened slightly. Commander, I know this seems reckless to you. Your species evolved on a gentle world. You see Varan Prime as hostile and deadly. We see it as challenging. That difference in perspective is why we can help. Trust us. As the humans dispersed to prepare, Proxen contacted Dr. Haijin in the medical bay. Doctor, your commander is about to deploy to the planet. Don't you want to say goodbye? He knows I'm here if needed, Haijin replied, not looking up from her current patient. But these people need me now. Taming can handle the mission. The absolute confidence in her voice was stunning. Proxen closed the connection and looked at Ambassador Valthara. They're either going to save us all, she said quietly, or we've just watched 5 people volunteer for death. The dropship hammer fell through Varan Prime's atmosphere like a stone. Inside the command center, Coalition officers watched the telemetry with growing horror. The small craft was being battered by winds that would tear apart their best atmospheric fighters. Lightning struck its hull 3 times. The gravity well pulled at it with crushing force. Moray's voice came through the communication channel, calm and steady. Experiencing some turbulence. Nothing we can't handle. Commander Proxen watched his monitors in disbelief. The ship was spinning, dropping at speeds that should be fatal. Yet somehow Myri controlled it, making minute adjustments that kept them on course. Her reaction time was impossible. No Coalition pilot could process information that fast. She's compensating for wind shear before it fully develops, the station's chief pilot whispered. How is she predicting the weather patterns? Ambassador Valthara had been reading the data files on Earth. It says here that Earth has something called extreme weather events. Hurricanes, tornadoes, ice storms. Their pilots train in conditions we would consider unsurvivable. The hammer broke through the lower cloud layer. The surface of Varan Prime spread below them, a nightmare landscape of volcanic vents, jagged rock formations, and sulfurous lakes. The temperature readout showed negative 60 degrees Celsius. Wind screamed across the broken terrain at 150 kilometers per hour. Myri landed the ship in a sheltered canyon. The landing was so smooth that several Coalition officers checked their instruments, certain there had been an error. We're down, Myri reported. Deploying ground team now. The camera feeds showed 4 figures emerging from the hammer. Taemin, Jinho, Sejin, and a 5th human who had been waiting in the ship, a woman named Bora, a squad leader who specialized in ground combat. They wore environmental suits, but these were nothing like the bulky protective gear Coalition species required. The human suits were sleek, flexible, allowing full range of motion. Through the helmet cameras, the Coalition officers could see the humans' faces. They looked alert but not afraid. Environmental readings confirmed, Timon said. Gravity is 1.8 times Earth standard. Temperature is negative 62. Atmospheric pressure is tolerable. Proceeding to target Alpha. They began moving across the terrain. Proxen expected them to struggle, to move slowly and carefully. Instead, they ran. Not jaunting, but actual running, leaping across gaps in the rock, climbing surfaces that looked impossible to scale. The heavy gravity that would crush Coalition soldiers to their knees seemed barely to slow them. How? Proxen asked no one in particular. Ambassador Valthara had found more information. Earth's gravity is already 1.1 times Coalition standard. Their muscles, their bone density, their cardiovascular systems all designed for higher gravity. They're not fighting against Varan Prime. They're barely inconvenienced by it. Jinho knelt and began setting up equipment, planting seismic sensors. These will map the Crethian tunnel networks. Give me 10 minutes. While he worked, Bora and Sijin established a perimeter. They moved with practiced efficiency, each covering angles that protected the others. Their formation was tight but flexible, adapting instantly to the terrain. A new human appeared on the feeds. Heijun, the youngest member of the team, was climbing a sheer cliff face that rose 200 meters above the canyon floor. He moved without ropes, his fingers finding holds in rock that looked smooth. Within 15 minutes, he reached the top. Overwatch position established, Heijun reported. I have visual on the primary Krethian base, approximately 800 meters east. How did he climb that? A coalition officer asked in shock. Earth has mountains, Ambassador Velthara read from her files. Some of their peaks reach over 8,000 meters into thin atmosphere. Humans climb them for recreation. The word hung in the air. Recreation. These beings climb deadly mountains for fun. The seismic sensors activated. Data flowed into the hammer's computers and back to the station. A three-dimensional map of the Krethian tunnel network appeared on the displays. It was vast, complex, spreading for kilometers underground. That's their staging area, Tiemann said, studying the data. They're using the natural cave systems enhanced with their own excavations. Jinho, can you collapse it? Jinho examined the geological data. Yes, the rock strata has natural fault lines. Properly placed charges could trigger a cascade collapse. But I'd need to place them inside the tunnels. Do it. Bara, you're with him. Sijun, establish a defensive position here in case they send patrols. Heijun, maintain overwatch. Report any movement. The team split up without question or hesitation. Jinho and Bora disappeared into a tunnel entrance. Their helmet cameras showed the interior dark, narrow passages carved by alien mandibles. They moved through the tunnels like ghosts. The coalition officers watched in fascination. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. When they reached intersections, they communicated with hand signals, years of training evident in their coordination. Then they encountered the first Krethian patrol. 6 of the insectoid creatures rounded a corner, their mandibles clicking in communication. They were large, each one nearly 2 meters tall, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light. On any other world, they would be apex predators. Bora moved first. Her combat blade appeared in her hand, a human weapon, simple steel. She closed the distance before the Krethians could react. Her movements were economical, precise. She struck at joints in their exoskeletons, weak points that coalition analysts had never identified because no coalition soldier could move fast enough or with enough force to exploit them. 3 Krethians fell in as many seconds. The remaining 3 tried to swarm her, but Jinho had positioned himself perfectly to cover her flank. His weapon fired kinetic rounds that punched through chitin with devastating effect at close range. The entire engagement lasted 11 seconds. In the command center, every coalition officer stood silent. They had watched Krethian warriors shrug off energy weapons, survive explosive decompression, and tear through bulkheads. These humans had killed 6 of them in less time than it took to breathe. Continue mission, Tiemann said calmly, as if nothing significant had happened. Jinho and Bora moved deeper into the tunnels. They planted explosive charges at carefully calculated points. The Krethians sent more patrols. Each time the same result. The humans were simply faster, more efficient, more lethal. On the surface, Heijun's calm voice interrupted the tension. Movement detected. Krethian force, approximately 30 individuals, heading towards Seojun's position. Confirmed, Seojun replied. I see them. The camera feed showed the approaching Krethians. They moved in a swarm, relying on numbers and aggression. Standard Krethian tactics that had overwhelmed coalition positions for years. Seojun waited until they entered a narrow pass between 2 rock formations. Then he opened fire. His weapon was massive, something only possible to carry and use effectively in the hands of someone adapted to high gravity. The rounds it fired were explosive, designed to fragment on impact. In the confined space of the pass, each shot was devastating. The Krethians tried to charge through. On Coalition worlds, this would work, overwhelming defenders through sheer numbers and willingness to accept casualties. But Sejun wasn't a Coalition defender. He stood his ground, his aim never wavering, his fire controlled and deliberate. When it was over, 27 Krethian corpses filled the pass. 3 had retreated. Jinho status? Teeman asked. Charges placed. Ready to detonate on your command. Everyone fall back to extraction point. Myray, prepare for immediate dust-off. The team withdrew with the same efficiency they'd shown advancing. Within 12 minutes, they were back at the hammer. The ship lifted off, fighting through the atmosphere again with Myray at the controls. When they reached minimum safe distance, Teeman gave the order. Detonate. The charges exploded in perfect sequence. On the surface, the ground heaved and buckled. The Krethian tunnel network collapsed in stages, each explosion triggering the next in a carefully calculated chain reaction. Within 3 minutes, the entire base complex had fallen in on itself. In orbit, the Coalition sensors picked up the destruction. The Krethians' main staging ground, the base that had supported their siege of the station for 3 weeks, was simply gone. But the true shock came moments later when Danby intercepted Krethian communications from their orbital fleet. The translation came through in real time. Ground base destroyed. Unknown enemy force highly effective. Casualties severe. Reassessing strategic position. For the first time in Coalition records, the Krethians were using the word casualties. They were acknowledging losses. More than that, they were acknowledging an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. Commander Prokson stared at the communications display. They're afraid, he whispered. No, Ambassador Velthara corrected, her voice quiet. They're smart enough to recognize a superior predator when they encounter one. The hammer docked. The human team disembarked, looking tired but satisfied. Teeman approached Commander Prokson. Phase 1 complete. The Krethians will need time to regroup and reassess. That should give you the window you need to evacuate the civilians. But they won't abandon the system entirely. We'll need to hit the other 2 bases as well. You're going back down there? Prokson couldn't hide his shock. Of course, Teeman said. The second deployment went differently. The Krethians were waiting. As the hammer descended toward the second base location, warnings flooded the cockpit. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. The Krethians had repositioned their defensive weapons, learning from the first attack. They adapted faster than expected, Myray said, her hands moving across the controls in constant motion. The ship twisted and dove, evading fire that should have been impossible to avoid. This might get rough. An explosion rocked the hammer. Alarms screamed through the cabin. In the command center of Coalition Station Varan, officers watched in horror as the ship's shields failed. Myray, pull back. Commander Prokson shouted into the communications channel. Negative. We're committed. Her voice remained steady even as another hit struck the ship's hull. Brace for emergency landing. The hammer hit the ground hard, sliding across rock and ice before coming to rest against a cliff face. Smoke poured from one engine. The landing gear had collapsed on one side. Status? Teeman asked, already unstrapping from his seat. We're alive, Myray replied. But the hammer's not flying out of here. I'll need at least 8 hours for repairs, maybe more. Ambassador Velthara felt her chest tighten. They're stranded on the surface with the entire Krethian force knowing exactly where they are. Teeman's voice came through calmly. Change of plans. We're on foot. Agent, what's our distance to target? 12 kilometers north-northwest. Terrain is bad. Rocky hills, lots of exposed approach routes. Then we don't approach. They'll come to us. Everyone out. Bora, set up defensive positions around the hammer. Jinho, can you rig the emergency systems to give us early warning sensors? Already on it. The team deployed from the damaged ship. Within 20 minutes, they had transformed the crash site into a fortified position. Jinho had repurposed the ship's sensors to detect movement for 3 kilometers in every direction. Bora and Saijun had positioned themselves at elevated points with clear firing lanes. Heijin had found a rocky outcrop that gave him long-range visibility. In the command center, a coalition tactical officer studied the situation. They're surrounded. The Krethians are converging from 3 directions. At least 500 warriors, probably more. This is a disaster. No, said Ambassador Volthara, who had been studying more human history files. This is what they call a defensive position. They're not trapped there with the Krethians. The Krethians are trapped out there with them. The first wave hit at dawn. 200 Krethian warriors rushed the human position in a coordinated assault. It was a sound tactic overwhelming force applied rapidly to prevent the enemy from establishing proper defense. Heiyun fired first. His rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. 3 Krethian warriors fell, each shot perfectly placed in the vulnerable spots where their exoskeletons joined. His rate of fire was inhuman, yet each shot was precise. Humans have binocular vision, Dr. Haijin explained from the medical bay, watching the feeds between treating patients. Forward-facing eyes designed for tracking prey. Our depth perception is better than most species. Combined with fine motor control and pattern prediction, we can calculate trajectories instinctively. Heijin isn't just shooting. He's predicting where they'll be and putting rounds in those spots. The Krethians closed the distance. At 200 meters, Seojun opened fire. His heavy weapon chewed through the charging aliens with methodical precision. The coalition officers had seen this weapon used before. It was devastating, but required careful timing and positioning. Seojun simply held his ground. The recoil that would knock most beings backward barely moved him. He adjusted his aim between bursts, compensating for the movements of the attackers with the same predictive ability Heijun showed. 50 Krethians made it through the fire zone. They reached the perimeter where Bora waited. What happened next was difficult for the coalition observers to process. Bora moved through the Krethian warriors like water flowing around rocks. She was outnumbered 50 to 1, but she was never where the attacks landed. Her blades struck constantly quick cuts at joints, precise thrusts at sensory organs, economical movements that disabled without wasted effort. She's using their own momentum against them, a coalition combat instructor observed. When they lunge, she sidesteps and redirects them into each other. She's treating them like obstacles in a course, not threats. Because to her, they are obstacles, Ambassador Valthara said quietly. She's not fighting. She's problem-solving. The first assault broke. The Krethians retreated, leaving 70 dead and many more wounded. Not a single human had been scratched. The second wave came an hour later. 300 warriors, better coordinated. They had watched the first assault and adapted. They came from multiple angles simultaneously, trying to divide the human defenders. Tinyin's voice was calm. Jinho, how long until you can collapse that ridge to the east? Already prepped. Say the word. Wait for my signal. Bora, fall back to secondary position. Seijun, shift to cover the western approach. Heijun, prioritize any Krethians carrying ranged weapons. The coalition officers watched as the humans repositioned smoothly, each person moving to exactly where they needed to be without confusion or delay. It was coordination born from thousands of hours of training, from evolutionary advantages in spatial reasoning and pack hunting tactics. The Krethians charged. This time they made it closer before Teeman gave the order. Jinho, now. The explosions brought down a section of the ridge, creating an avalanche of rock that crushed dozens of Krethians and blocked one entire approach route. The remaining attackers funneled into kill zones the humans had deliberately left open. The battle lasted 6 hours. Wave after wave of Krethian warriors threw themselves at the human position. Each wave broke. The coalition watched in growing awe and horror as 5 humans held off hundreds of the galaxy's most aggressive warriors. Then something changed. Jinho stumbled during the 8th wave. He recovered quickly, but not before taking a hit from a Krethian mandible. The impact threw him backward into the rocks. Jinho's down. Bora's voice showed emotion for the first time, actual concern breaking through the combat calm. The coalition medical staff checked his vital signs remotely. He has 2 fractured ribs and a broken arm. He needs immediate evacuation. But there was no way to evacuate him. The hammer was still grounded. Myre worked frantically on repairs, but needed more time. Jinho pulled himself up. Through the helmet camera, observers could see him wincing with pain. He checked his weapon, reloaded with his good hand, and returned to his position. Jinho, stand down, Teeman ordered. Negative, Commander. I can still fight. You have broken bones. I know. Doesn't matter. We need everyone on the line. He continued fighting. For another hour, with 2 broken ribs and a fractured arm, Jinho maintained his position. He was slower. His movements showed pain, but he didn't stop. Dr. Haijin watched from the medical bay, her jaw tight. He's flooding his system with adrenaline. It's overriding the pain signals. They'll pay for it later, but right now he's fully functional. How is that possible? Krelix asked. Humans can consciously trigger stress responses. Fight or flight. When we choose fight, our body's change pain tolerance increases, strength spikes, focus sharpens. It's a survival mechanism from Earth. When retreat wasn't an option, our ancestors had to be able to continue fighting through injuries that would incapacitate other species. The Krethians finally pulled back. They didn't retreat fully, but they stopped attacking. In the tunnels beneath the surface, new communication signals pulsed through their network. Danby intercepted them. They're calling in their elite forces, something they call the Prime Warriors, best of their species, reserved for critical battles. How many? Teeman asked. 20. But the communication suggests they're individually much more dangerous than standard warriors. The Prime Warriors emerged at dusk. They were larger, their exoskeletons darker and more heavily armored. They moved with intelligence rather than instinct, taking cover, coordinating in small teams, using tactics instead of pure aggression. Finally, Seojin muttered. A real challenge. The battle that followed was different. The Krethian primes fought with strategy. They flanked, they suppressed, they adapted to the humans' tactics in real time. It was the first time the humans showed signs of being genuinely pressed. Heijun took a glancing hit that cracked his helmet. He sealed the breach and continued fighting, but his rate of fire decreased. Bora was forced fully on the defensive, unable to counterattack. Seojun ran through ammunition faster than anticipated. Then Teeman did something unexpected. He stood up in full view of the Krethian primes and transmitted on their communication frequency. I am Commander Teeman of Earth. You are fighting a species that evolved on a death world. You cannot win through force. You cannot win through numbers. You will only win if we choose to let you. We don't choose that. Withdraw, or we will eliminate every warrior you send. There was silence. Then one of the Krethian primes approached, alone. It was massive, scarred from countless battles. It moved carefully, not attacking, but assessing. Teeman walked forward to meet it. They stood 3 meters apart, human and alien, each measuring the other, the Krethian Prime Spock. The Krethian fleet withdrew from Coalition Station Varan 48 hours after the confrontation on the surface. No final battle, no dramatic last stand. They simply gathered their forces and jumped away to other territories. For the first time in Coalition records, the swarm had given up on a target they wanted. The human team returned to the station as heroes, but the reception was complicated. Crowds gathered to watch them disembark from the repaired hammer. There was cheering, gratitude, and unmistakable fear. Commander Prilkson stood at the airlock with Ambassador Velthara. When Taman emerged, followed by his team, Prilkson extended all four arms in the traditional greeting of highest respect. Commander Taman, on behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I thank you and your team for your service. You have accomplished what we thought impossible. Taman accepted the gesture with a small bow. We were honored to help, Commander. Prilkson noticed Jinho moving stiffly, his arm in a medical brace. The human had continued fighting for another hour after suffering injuries that should have incapacitated him. Dr. Hygiene walked beside him, monitoring him carefully. Your wounded should come to our medical bay, Prilkson offered. Already treated, Hygiene replied. Though I'd like to coordinate with your physicians on some cases that require specialized care. She meant the Coalition wounded, Prilkson realized. Even after everything, her first thought was still for the patient she'd been helping. The debriefing took place in the main conference chamber. Coalition officers from multiple species filled the room, all wanting to understand what had happened. Taman stood before them and delivered his report with military precision. The Krethian forces on Varan Prime were eliminated in 3 operations. Primary staging base destroyed on day 1. Secondary forces engaged on day 2. Tertiary positions were abandoned when we destroyed supply lines on day 3. Estimated Krethian casualties: 1,200 warriors, including 20 elite primes. Human casualties: 0 fatalities, 3 minor injuries. The numbers hung in the air: 1,200 to 0. It was impossible, yet everyone had watched it happen. A coalition general from the warrior species stood. Commander Taman, I have studied war for my entire life. What you accomplished defies every tactical principle we know. Please explain how this was possible. Taman considered the question carefully. It comes down to adaptation and environment. Earth is what humans call a death world. High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous predators, toxic plants, and countless microorganisms that try to kill us daily. Surviving there required humanity to develop specific traits. He gestured to Myray. Our pilots have reflexes fast enough to navigate conditions that would overwhelm most neural processors. We evolved to track fast-moving prey and avoid fast-moving predators. He nodded to Hadjin. Our visual systems provide depth perception and the ability to calculate trajectories instinctively. We used to hunt with thrown spears, which required predicting where an animal would be seconds in the future. Boris stepped forward. Our bodies can regulate stress responses. In dangerous situations, we produce chemicals that increase strength, dull pain, and sharpen focus. We can fight through injuries because our ancestors had to stopping to heal meant death. And our intelligence evolved specifically for problem solving, Taman concluded. We're not the strongest species, or the fastest, or the most numerous. But we're adaptable. We use tools. We cooperate. We think strategically. Earth made us generalists who excel at survival. Ambassador Velthara spoke up, her voice quiet. You're describing predators. Apex predators. Yes, Taman said simply. Humans are predators. But we're also prey. We evolved to be both, which gave us perspective other species lack. We understand fear because we felt it. We understand hunting because we did it. We understand cooperation because we needed it to survive. A scientist from an aquatic species raised a tentacle. Commander, I've been reviewing the environmental data from Earth. Your planet's conditions would kill most coalition species within hours. Your oxygen levels alone are toxic to several species. How do you consider this normal? My race smiled slightly. Because it's home. You see a death world. We see where we came from. The place that made us who we are. Dr. Haijin added, Earth gave us challenges, but it also gave us diversity. Our planet has multiple climate zones, varying gravity at different altitudes, and an ecosystem so complex that new species are still being discovered. We had to adapt to constant change. That's why we can survive in places like Varan Prime. It's harsh, but it's consistent. We find consistency easier than you might think. The debriefing continued for hours. The coalition officers asked countless questions. How do humans handle extreme temperatures? How can they function with so little sleep? How do they maintain combat effectiveness under stress? Each answer revealed more about Earth's nature. The planet wasn't just dangerous, it was actively hostile to life. Yet humanity had thrived there, turning every challenge into an evolutionary advantage. Commander Proxen finally asked the question everyone was thinking. Commander Tamin, your species has capabilities far beyond most coalition members. Your technology, while newer, is advancing rapidly. Your military prowess is evident. Why did Earth join the coalition? You could have remained independent, even expanded on your own. Tamin's expression softened for the first time. Because we don't want to be alone. Yes, Earth made us strong. But it also taught us the value of cooperation. Humans survived not as individuals, but as tribes, communities, civilizations. We built societies because together we're stronger than alone. He looked around the room at the dozens of different species. You asked why we joined the coalition. Because we saw something worth being part of. Different species working together, sharing knowledge, protecting each other. That's exactly what humanity learned to do on Earth. We're predators, yes, but we're also pack animals. We bond with those we trust. We protect those we consider part of our pack. Ambassador Velthara felt tears forming in her eyes. You fight for us because you've adopted us into your pack. Exactly, Tamin said. The coalition called for help. We answered because that's what pack members do. We'll always answer. In the following days, the full reality of humanity's nature spread through the coalition. Some species were frightened. Proposals emerged to restrict human expansion, to monitor Earth more closely, to limit human access to certain technologies. But then something unexpected happened. The wounded coalition soldiers, whom Dr. Haijin had treated, began speaking publicly. They testified about her dedication, working without rest to save lives. About Jingho making jokes to keep spirits up even while injured. About Tamin personally carrying wounded soldiers to safety during the surface battles. A young coalition student who had been trapped on the station during the siege made a video that spread across the galactic network. It showed Heijun, the sniper who had killed dozens of Krethians with precision accuracy, sitting with the station's children during an evacuation drill. He was teaching them a human strategy game, smiling, letting them win, showing infinite patience. The video's caption read, "These are Deathworlders. They're also our friends." Public opinion shifted. Yes, humans were dangerous. Yes, they came from a world that would terrify most species. But they were also kind, compassionate, and willing to risk their lives for others. The Coalition Council convened for a final decision. After 3 days of debate, they reached a consensus. Earth would not be restricted. Instead, humanity would be offered a unique role: peacekeepers and rapid response forces. When coalition members faced threats they couldn't handle alone, They could call on Earth. Commander Proxen delivered the news to Teeman personally. The Council has recognized that humanity possesses unique capabilities. They're asking if Earth would be willing to serve as a defense force for Coalition members in crisis. Teeman smiled. We'd be honored. But we have one condition. Name it. We train Coalition forces. Share our tactics, our strategies, our understanding of combat. Not to make other species into warriors, but to help them defend themselves. We don't want to be the only ones who can fight. We want everyone to have the tools for survival. Proxen felt his stress fluids calm for the first time in weeks. You want to teach rather than dominate. Always, Teeman replied. Earth learned that cooperation is stronger than competition. We want to share that lesson. The human team prepared to depart the next day. Dr. Hygiene had trained a dozen Coalition medical personnel in her techniques. Jinho had upgraded the station's defensive systems and taught the engineers how to maintain them. Danby had established secure communication protocols that would benefit the entire Coalition. As they boarded the Hammer, station personnel lined the corridors to say goodbye. There were no more looks of fear. Instead, there was respect, gratitude, and something else, hope. Commander Proxen stood at the airlock one final time. Commander Tamman, thank you. For everything. Tamman shook his hand, the human gesture Proxen had learned. Call us if you need us. Anytime. We're part of the Coalition now. That means we're family. The Hammer undocked and jumped away. In the command center, Ambassador Velthara stood beside Proxen, watching the departure. The galaxy just changed, she said softly. Humanity proved that strength doesn't require